Hello, beautiful people. It's Lulu. Welcome to the Lulu Essie podcast, where we do things differently. No editing, no polishing, no fancy studio magic, just honest conversations that stay exactly as they happened. Welcome back to our mental fitness series. As with last week, I'd like to start by saying that this is simply a conversation with no judgment about your own mental fitness journey. And very importantly, please know that I honor and respect those who choose to or need to be on medication. The practices we'll discuss today are meant to complement, not replace, any existing treatment or support that you might have. Take what resonates with you and leave what doesn't. Now that we have that all clear, let's explore together. In our last episode, we discussed how winter teaches us to work with our natural rhythms. Today, we're going to talk about building what I call your mental fitness bank. But before we dive in, I'd love you to try something with me. Imagine you have a mental fitness bank account. Just like a normal bank account, it can have deposits, withdrawals, and a running balance. Take a moment now to check your balance. Check in with yourself. Just take a breath. Be present with me for a moment. How full or how empty does your inner bank feel right now? Just notice, without judgment, whatever your balance is, it's okay. We're just getting a sense of where we're at right now. You know, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of a mental fitness bank. And I know what you might be thinking. Really, Lulu? Another metaphor? Yes, another metaphor. Why? Because it works and it's so simple to understand. We all get how a bank account works. We make deposits, we make withdrawals, and hopefully over time, we build some savings. Some months we save more. Some months we need to spend more. Some months we are completely unconscious and spend outrageously. And yeah, that can be fun. The point is, our mental fitness works in exactly the same way. I learned this the hard way. And yes, there's always a hard way with me. Before I realized things didn't have a hard way, life always led me to the hard lessons. I used to think I could just keep making withdrawals, keep pushing, keep spending, so to speak, keep giving, keep doing, without ever thinking about making deposits. I was basically running on an emotional and a mental overdraft. And let me tell you, the fees you have to pay for that kind of overdraft are much higher than any bank would charge. And those fees cost you in something way more valuable than money. They cost big, fat chunks of our well-being, our soul, our joy. But here's the thing on running on empty and paying those hefty fees. We often don't realize that we're doing it until we're completely depleted, until we crash, until our mental fitness account is not just empty, but seriously overdrawn. And I know this because I've been there. I've been there more times than I can count. So what do we do? How do we start building our mental fitness bank balance? And more importantly, how do we maintain it? Because unlike a regular bank account, we can't just make one big deposit and live off the interest. Mental fitness requires consistent, mindful deposits. Tiny ones, medium ones, and sometimes we get to make those delicious big deposits too. But before we get into practical tools, I want to clarify something important with you. Just like we talked about in our last episode about winter and our natural rhythms, there will be times where you need to make more withdrawals than deposits. That's normal, even though I'm not a fan of that word normal. Let's say that's natural. That's human. The key isn't to never make withdrawals. The key is to build enough reserves so that when those heavy withdrawal periods come, and they will come, you have something to draw from. So that when a period of heavy stress hits you, for example, you have something to draw from. So let's talk about what these deposits actually look like in the real world of our real everyday lives. And before you start thinking this is going to be some complicated system that requires tracking and measuring and adding more to your to-do list, stop right there. Remember, we're working with our natural rhythms here, not against them. I want to share some of the simplest, most effective deposits I've discovered through my own journey. These are practices that don't require special equipment, don't need hours of your time, and most importantly, they don't add to your mental load. Because the last thing we need when we're trying to build up mental fitness is more pressure. So let's start with what I call micro deposits, tiny practices that take less than 1 minute but have the power to gently, effectively begin to shift our entire mental state. One of my favorite micro deposits is something I call the 3-breath reset. It's exactly what it sounds like, just 3 conscious breaths. Not fancy breathing exercises, not complicated patterns. I know we have spoken about box breathing before, and that remains powerful, but this is even more simple. It's just 3 normal breaths where you actually notice that you're breathing. That's it. You notice the air coming in to your body and then leaving your body. And you can do this literally anywhere. In a meeting, at your desk, in line at the grocery store, even in the bathroom if that's the only quiet moment you get. Another micro deposit that's been a game changer for me is what I call the pause and notice. This is actually a grounding exercise. When you catch yourself in that spiral of go, 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 must do everything, and you feel your anxiety level rising, pause. Notice your surroundings. Really take note of your environment. What's around you? Notice one thing you can see. One thing you can hear. One thing you can feel, not emotionally, but with your fingers or your feet or your skin. One thing you can smell. One thing you can taste. Really engage your senses. It's like pressing a tiny reset button on your nervous system. Don't overcomplicate this. Just pause and bring awareness to your physical senses. This exercise helps bring you into the moment. It gently brings you back from your mental spiral into the here and now. It simply, powerfully grounds you. I find it really calming. I find it soothing and grounding. Try it out. And beauties, here's something important about these micro deposits. They work best when they're not another should. You're not failing if you forget to do them. You're not behind if you miss a day. Don't use these tools to judge yourself and your progress. Remember what we talked about last week. This isn't about pushing harder or doing more. It's about finding those natural moments to build your balance, build your fitness, one tiny deposit at a time. Before we move on to what I call medium-sized deposits, I want to share something with you. Years ago, during one of my really challenging periods, and when I say challenging, I mean the shit was really hitting the fan, and I was barely able to keep my head above water. My therapist at the time suggested I started with these tiny practices. Just breathe, just notice, just pause. And I remember thinking, that's it? That's what I'm paying you for? Surely that's not enough. Because I was still in that mindset of needing everything to be big and dramatic, maybe even traumatic, to be transformative. I was so desperate at the time that along with my meds, I decided to give these practices a try. And here's what I discovered. These micro deposits began to create space for bigger deposits. It's like they cleared the path for more substantial practices. They made space for bigger, gradual transformation. Which brings us to medium deposits. These are practices that might take a little bit more time, maybe 5 to 15 minutes, but they can really build your mental fitness reserves. It's really important to be mindful of the fact that there is compound interest on all deposits, micro deposits, medium deposits, and large deposits. In very simple terms, every deposit you make builds on the overall balance and makes you fitter and mentally stronger. Okay, let's make it even simpler. It all counts. It all matters. And every deposit, regardless of size, increases your balance. Okay, so on to medium deposits. One of my favorite medium deposits is what I call intentional joy. And this isn't about forcing happiness or pushing away difficult feelings. It's about consciously choosing to do something that brings you genuine pleasure and creates the feeling of joy from the inside. For me, it's having my morning coffee outside when I can. Really savoring it, feeling the mug in my hands, watching the steam rise. And if the sun is out, that is like joy on steroids for me. It just amplifies my practice. Or another medium deposit could be taking a shower without rushing, actually feeling the water on my skin, instead of mentally running through my to-do list or my what I did wrong list. Just letting the water create that feeling of joy. And I focus on really that feeling and feeling it inside. And here's something that if you add to this practice, it's like supercharging it, turbocharging it. And that is to bring gratitude to this practice. Feel the joy, really feel it, and then feel the gratitude for that moment in time. Like I said last week, gratitude is like a mental fitness superfood. It amplifies. And a little side note here, but a very important note, and we'll talk more about this at a later stage. I just want to make things clear. Joy is something that comes from inside, whereas happiness is usually attached to something outside of ourselves, like our stuff, achievements, holidays. The two, joy and happiness, can happen together, but they are different. But again, let's keep things simple for now. Joy is an inside job. Now, let's talk about what I call larger deposits. And before you start worrying, I'm not about to suggest hour-long meditations. Although, if that is part of your practice, that is wonderful, and meditation is hugely beneficial. But with larger deposits, I'm also not suggesting complicated routines. Remember, we're working with our natural rhythms here and keeping things simple and doable. So, larger deposits are simply practices that might take a bit more time or focused intention. But these can really boost your mental fitness reserves. And remember, if you can't make a larger deposit, that is absolutely okay. Just do what you can. Bigger is not always better, and consistency, not size, is the key ingredient here. So, one of my absolute favorite larger deposits is something I started doing years ago. It's creating what I call joy dates with myself. I learned a version of this doing the wonderful Julia Cameron's program called The Artist's Way. And I know this might sound a bit out there, but just stay open before you decide if this is for you or not. This is also not about spending lots of money. Sometimes you don't have to spend any money at all. It's not about doing anything elaborate. It is about intentionally carving out time. Maybe an hour, maybe a morning, an afternoon, to do something that fills you up from the inside. For me, it's taking myself to a museum to see an exhibition. Or just this past Sunday night, I flew solo and took myself to see a movie. It might also be going to the park without my headphones and being very mindful of my surroundings, what I see, how I feel. As with glimmers, find something that lights you up and turns you on from the inside, and do that thing. Maybe that thing for you is lying on the grass in the park with a book, or giving yourself the gift of browsing in a bookshop. The key isn't what you do. It's the intention behind it. It's saying to yourself, I matter enough to take this time. It's making a conscious choice to invest in your mental fitness. This is best done alone. Of course, it's healthy for us to spend time with friends, family, those we love. But this is time for you, with you, and only you. I don't do this very often, but I do make a point of it. Do what is manageable for you. And as we wrap up today's episode about building your mental fitness bank, I want to remind you that just like we talked about with Winter's wisdom last week, this isn't about perfection. Embrace your messiness. I'd say celebrate it, but that may feel a bit too much for you right now. And embrace taking imperfect action. Mental fitness is about finding what works for you, what feels manageable, what feels doable, and most importantly, what feels sustainable. Start with those micro deposits, and if that feels doable, maybe explore a medium deposit when you're ready. And when it feels right, try giving yourself the gift of a larger deposit. Remember, your mental fitness bank balance will fluctuate. And that's natural. That's part of being human. The key is building our reserves gradually, consistently, in ways that feel honest to us, to our lives, and how we show up in the world. And I have something special to ask you. I would love to hear about your specific questions or challenges around mental fitness. What's coming up for you as you're building your own practice? What feels challenging? What would you like to know more about? What are your questions around this subject? Send me your questions. You can send them through Instagram, via email at lulu@luluSC.com. Because I'm thinking of dedicating an episode to addressing your questions, your real life challenges, your journey. I would love the opportunity to bring some hope, some light, and help with some practical suggestions on how to improve your mental fitness. And I don't want to make any assumptions, so let me say that there is no place for shame here. Wherever you are and whatever you're struggling with, whether it's so-called big or small, let's leave shame at the door and keep our hearts and minds open to ourselves first and to each other. Mental fitness looks different for us all. And share, please share this episode with those you love and care about, or with anyone you know who may be on this journey. And I want to take a moment also to thank you and express a depth of gratitude that is challenging for me to put into words. Thank you for listening and sharing. I got a notification on Saturday, the 18th of January, this past Saturday, that my podcast had 500 downloads. I was beside myself. I was so elated. I screamed with joy. I cried. I feel so lucky. It's such a privilege that I get to have these conversations with you. So thank you. Next week, we'll explore the final part of our mental fitness series, Dancing with Light and Shadow, where we'll dive into maintaining our mental fitness through all of life's seasons. Send me your questions. Be gentle with yourself as you start making these deposits. Trust your rhythm, honor your pace, and remember, every tiny deposit counts. Every deposit is worth it because you are worth it. There is no right way to do this. There is only your way. Just listening to this podcast counts as a deposit. You showed up for yourself. And as always, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, like every day, this comes straight from my heart to yours. And it comes with so much love and so much gratitude.